Richard Carson, who is a beloved accountant, and his wife Sophia Carson, a well-respected elementary school teacher, lived in a beautiful suburban neighborhood, the type with well-manicured lawns, white picket fences, and a serene atmosphere. The Carson family also included their two children, Ava and Tyler, who were the greatest gift their parents ever received. The family seemed to represent the ideal American dream. On a cool autumn morning, the illusion of perfection crumbled. Richard Carson returned from a weekend fishing trip with friends to a house that was disturbingly quiet. The familiar warmth and liveliness were gone, replaced by an eerie silence. He called out for Sophia, but the only answer was the echo of his own voice. A sense of worry took hold of him as he walked up the stairs to their bedroom. What he found was something no one would wish on their worst enemies. Sophia was lying still on the bed, her skin deathly pale contrasting with the dark, dried blood staining the sheets. Richard's heart raced as he hurried to her side, shaking her lifeless body repeatedly, hoping she would wake up and that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Amidst Richard's panic attack, reality settled in, and he realized his wife was gone. Richard's panicked call to 911 brought the police and paramedics racing to the scene. They confirmed what Richard had feared most. Sophia Carson was without a doubt dead. The initial investigation began with officers searching through the house for clues. Richard was still in shock, barely able to process the questions asked of him. The case was handled by Detective Sarah McMillan, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for her keen instincts. She soon found no evidence of forced entry, suggesting that Sophia must have known her attacker. As the investigation progressed, Richard's alibis were brought in to give their testimonials. His fishing buddies confirmed his story, placing him far away at the time of Sophia's death. The whole community was shocked, as they had always seen the Carsons as the perfect couple, with thriving lives, beautiful kids, and deeply rooted love for one another. But after a few days, Sophia's best friend Laura revealed that Sophia had feared Richard was cheating. Although this was just hearsay, it still cast a shadow of suspicion over Richard, despite his solid alibi. The media didn't waste time picking up the story, painting a picture of a distressed marriage that led to a crime of passion. The police were now under public pressure to give a statement, but their hands were tied as Richard's alibi was airtight. It was then that Sophia's sister Megan took matters into her own hands. She hired Jake Thompson, a private investigator, hoping to uncover the real truth, as there was currently no explanation for Sophia's death. Richard and Sophia Carson were high school sweethearts, madly in love and inseparable. After graduation, they went to college together, got married, and started their perfect family. Their story seemed almost too perfect, filled with happiness, love, and two wonderful children. Richard was a very successful accountant, while Sophia pursued a career in teaching. They lived in a great community and were very active individuals, always helping their neighbors, participating in social events, and most importantly, they were always seen together, smiling and radiating positivity, or so it seemed. But after a few years, Sophia began to harbor growing suspicions about her husband's fidelity. It started with late nights at the office, calls at unexplained times, and Richard's increasing neglect of their relationship. Sophia confided her suspicions and fears to Laura. Laura suggested confronting Richard directly, but Sophia was hesitant, fearing it would ruin their marriage completely. So she continued to give Richard the benefit of the doubt. As time passed, Sophia's fears grew more intense. She became so paranoid that she began checking Richard's phone when he was in the bathroom and scrolling through his texts in search of any evidence to confirm her suspicions. Over the years, the constant anxiety and fear began to take a toll on her mental state. This further strained their already distant marriage, widening the divide between them. Sophia asked Laura if she was overthinking everything, but Laura was at a loss for words as this had been going on for quite some time now. One evening, Sophia discovered a clearly visible lipstick stain on Richard's office shirt, and in that instant, her fears were confirmed. She lost her composure and confronted him, but Richard denied any infidelity, insisting it was just a mix-up and that Sophia had nothing to worry about. However, after years of harboring these fears, this incident shattered her trust and changed everything. The Carson house was never the same after that. Frequent fights and arguments only grew with time. Sophia felt trapped in a marriage filled with doubt and resentment. She reminisced about their time together in college, claiming it was the best period of her life. As time went by, Richard grew increasingly frustrated with the accusations. Every day at the Carson house was marked by the same story. Sophia also thought about hiring a private investigator, but she deep down didn't want to believe that her husband would do such a thing, and that held her back. She talked to Laura regularly, who acted as her support throughout the years. Out of paranoia, Sophia began journaling everything, every suspicious incident, every argument, and every excuse. She wanted to ensure that if the truth ever came to light, she would be prepared with all the necessary evidence to address it definitively. Sophia and her sister Megan were close, and Megan was aware of the rising tensions in the Carson household. She also noticed drastic changes in Sophia's behavior. Megan urged Sophia to take some form of action, but Sophia felt stuck, with nowhere to turn. As months passed, Sophia's suspicions turned into an all-consuming obsession. It dominated her thoughts 24/7, leaving her absent-minded and unable to shake the thoughts from her mind. The police investigation was led by Detective Sarah McMillian, who worked extensively to piece together the events that led to Sophia Carson's death. They brought everyone in for interrogation, including her family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors. They wanted to build a profile of Sophia's life and narrow down motives for her murder. Richard was being more than cooperative, and his solid alibi kept him out of direct suspicion. Meanwhile, Megan was desperate for answers, compelling her to hire Jake Thompson, hoping he would uncover the truth. Jake was one of the best investigators in town and had a great track record in uncovering cases that seemed to have more than what meets the eye. When Megan first approached him, he listened attentively to her concerns regarding Richard's infidelity. Megan told him about the change in Sophia's behavior, the incidents, and above all, the journal. Jake was compelled and took the case, starting with a line-by-line review of her journal. The journal was very descriptive and portrayed the picture of a woman scarred by doubt, fear, and anxiety. The paragraphs were written about Richard's behavior and the incidents and provided Jake with golden information that led him to believe that things did not add up and that there were cracks in the so-called perfect marriage. The first step Jake took was diving into Richard's background. Who really was Richard Carson? He began by keeping an eye on Richard, following him to work and monitoring his interactions. Everything seemed normal, but Jake knew better than to take things at face value. Sometimes what looks like a 6 can end up being a 9, and only then does everything make sense. Interviews with Sophia's friends revealed that she was a woman with no enemies, loved and respected by all. She was a dedicated woman who treated everyone with kindness, no matter the situation. They spoke of her love for her family, often sharing stories about what she and Richard did over the weekend, how the kids were progressing, and other details that painted a picture of a loving and devoted mother. However, they also mentioned the drastic changes in her behavior over the past few years. She became more distant, always consumed by her thoughts, and often zoning out during conversations. Sophia's best friend Laura was a crucial source of information, having witnessed firsthand the trauma Sophia endured. Laura also mentioned a woman named Carla Mason, a former colleague of Richard's. At one point, they were very close. Professionally, it seemed. But Sophia was always suspicious of Carla and her intentions with her husband. Jake knew this was the thread to unravel. He conducted a thorough background check on Carla, uncovering a history of troubling details. Carla had numerous unsuccessful relationships and was often labeled as manipulative. She had left the company where she and Richard worked together for unknown reasons, but Jake was skeptical. He slowly started piecing things together. Carla's active presence in Richard's life, Sophia's extensive mentions of Carla in her journal, and Sophia's unexpected demise. These facts had to be connected. However, suspicion and gut feelings wouldn't hold up in court, and solid evidence was needed before making any claims. Jake now divided his focus between Richard and Carla. Upon interviewing her acquaintances, one thing became clear. Carla was a possessive woman who always got what she wanted. Jake also uncovered that Carla harbored deep hatred towards Sophia, seeing her as the only obstacle between herself and Richard. As the dots began to connect, Jake prepared to confront Carla, ready for an intense interrogation if necessary. Jake Thompson was no rookie. He had been doing this job for over 20 years, and in that time, he'd seen it all: infidelity, fraud, even murder. But if there's one thing he had learned, it was never to make assumptions too quickly. So he kept his composure and continued digging. The Carson case had a certain level of complexity, And as he dug deeper, a tangled web of lies and betrayal began to unfold. Richard Carson, who portrayed himself as the ideal husband, was indeed involved with Carla Mason, and their affair was far more than just a fling. Carla Mason was in her early 30s and had a strong appeal. Her nature and aura drew people to her. Richard met Carla when they both worked at the same accounting firm. However, their affair didn't happen overnight. It began with getting lunches together and after-hours texting. As they grew closer, those casual lunches developed into a passionate relationship. Jake was still on their trail, and soon enough, his surveillance yielded the exact evidence he needed. He captured photos of Richard and Carla secretly meeting and sharing intimate moments, which clearly illustrated the depth of their relationship. Let me remind you that this was only weeks after the death of Sophia, who was supposedly the love of Richard's life. When Carla met Richard, she saw him as a chance to escape her troubled past and find happiness after years of misery. However, Richard told Carla that he could never leave Sophia, as it would complicate things and negatively impact his children. This upset Carla. Although Richard treated Carla like a full-fledged girlfriend, the fact that he would never leave Sophia fueled Carla's resentment. Jake had a breakthrough when he discovered a series of emails between Richard and Carla. In these messages, Carla expressed her anger at Richard, accusing him of leading her on and demanding that he leave Sophia immediately. While Richard's responses were apologetic and comforting, he never addressed the core issue, leading Carla to believe he would never leave his family. Among the hundreds of emails, one stood out, sent about a week before Sophia's death. In this email, Carla wrote a long, emotional message threatening to expose the affair if Richard did not take action. She indirectly suggested that she was prepared to go to great lengths to remove Carla from the equation. Now Jake had all the evidence to link Carla directly to the crime. From the interviews with Carla's former colleagues and friends, he knew that Carla would go to any lengths to get what she wanted and was known for being highly manipulative, often using these traits to get her way. There was one colleague in particular who provided Jake with crucial information. He recalled a conversation with Carla a few months earlier, during which Carla had fantasized about starting a new life with Richard, moving away and leaving everything behind. She even joked about the possibility of Sophia suddenly passing away, leaving Richard free to be with her, a comment that, in retrospect, seemed more than just a joke. The affair began about 3 years ago at an office party. Richard, cunning and charming, noticed Carla sitting alone with her drink and struck up a conversation. They discovered they had much in common. Both loved their work but felt stuck in a rut, yearning for something new and exciting. Richard spoke about his unfulfilling marriage, while Carla shared her hopes of finding true love and happiness. Their initial conversation led to a deep bond, and they quickly became eager to spend more time together. They started meeting for lunches, then dinners, and eventually secret nights at hotels. Although Richard was driven by a guilty conscience and was determined to keep the affair hidden, Carla, unburdened by such constraints, found her feelings for Richard growing stronger. She fantasized about a relationship where they could openly express their love, and where Richard could publicly claim her without hesitation. Carla's fantasies, however, were overshadowed by the reality of Sophia's presence. Every time she was with Richard and saw a text or call from Sophia, her heart would sink, pushing her to the brink of madness. Carla began to bottle up these emotions, knowing that constantly nagging Richard would drive him away. Eventually, she couldn't hold back any longer. She started calling Richard at all hours, demanding to know what he was doing and who he was with. Her possessiveness reemerged, and her old patterns became apparent. Carla even began monitoring his social media and showing up unannounced at places where Richard would be. Over time, Richard felt constrained by Carla's constant need for attention and began to feel trapped by her neediness. The boiling point came when Carla discovered that Richard had been lying to her about going out on the weekends with Sophia when he was actually just at home. Infuriated by this, she confronted him, leading to a massive argument. Carla gave Richard an ultimatum: leave Sophia or she would expose their affair. Richard was caught off guard by her demand and tried to calm her down. Although he knew deep down that he lacked the courage to leave his wife, he still promised Carla that he would do it soon. Carla's hatred for Sophia intensified as days went by. She began to physically stalk Sophia, tracking her daily routine and habits. Carla would even drive past the Carson house late at night, peering through the windows. Her frustration grew as she saw another woman living the life she had always desired. Carla had experienced only failed relationships and trauma in the past, and now when she was on the brink of having everything she wanted, Sophia was the only obstacle in her way. Carla's plan to eliminate Sophia was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It developed over several months. She meticulously devised ways to carry out her plan, getting closer to the fateful day. The email she sent to Richard was her last attempt to secure him without taking drastic action. When Richard's refusal became clear, Carla knew she had to take matters into her own hands. She chose to act on the day Richard was away on his fishing trip because she not only wanted the coast to be clear, but also wanted to keep Richard out of any trouble. Carla had planned every detail meticulously, entering through the back door, covering her face with a scarf, parking her car 2 blocks away, and wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. What stood out was that she had a spare key to the house, one Richard had given her. This was unusual because Carla had no legitimate reason to be at the Carson house, raising the question, why had Richard given her the key? Nevertheless, Carla used it to enter the Carsons' home, moving silently through the dark rooms. Sophia was in deep sleep when Carla entered the bedroom. Seeing Sophia sleeping so peacefully ignited Carla's rage. She stood over Sophia's slumbering body as she clutched the knife tightly. Without hesitation, Carla ruthlessly stabbed Sophia repeatedly, her attack swift and fueled by years of resentment and hatred. Sophia woke up during the assault, but it was too late. In that moment, Carla felt a twisted sense of euphoria, believing that Richard would finally be hers. However, as the high of her act faded, reality set in. In a panic, she took the murder weapon and fled the house, leaving no signs of forced entry behind. Carla believed she had committed the perfect crime, but Jake Thompson's meticulous investigation began to unravel her illusion. He connected the dots. Sophia's journal filled with suspicions, statements from co-workers, friends, and acquaintances, and the incriminating photos of Carla and Richard secretly meeting just weeks after Sophia's death. All of this evidence points to one undeniable conclusion. Carla was responsible for Sophia's murder. Jake had worked closely with Detective Sarah McMillan, sharing his findings and actively collaborating on the investigation. During a thorough sweep of the crime scene, they discovered the most crucial piece of evidence, a single strand of hair. Carla had been meticulous, wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints and a scarf to conceal her face, but she couldn't prevent a strand of her hair from falling in the hallway as she hurried to make her exit. When interviewed, she had no alibi, claiming she was at home watching a movie. Jake understood that combining physical evidence with digital and testimonial proof would make for a compelling case. With all the pieces coming together, he shifted his focus to Carla's social circle. He conducted interviews with neighbors, friends, and even casual contacts, gradually building a profile of a woman consumed by desperation and jealousy. One neighbor mentioned seeing Carla's car parked near the Carson house multiple times, which corroborated her pattern of stalking behavior. To finalize the case, an unexpected source stepped forward, Richard himself. Overwhelmed with guilt from the affair and years of deceit, Richard agreed to assist in any way possible. He provided additional emails and messages from Carla, along with his testimony about her obsession and possessiveness. Richard's account was crucial, as it confirmed all suspicions and provided the final pieces needed to close the case. Jake and Detective McMillan meticulously compiled a comprehensive report detailing Carla's lethal motives and actions. The evidence against her was overwhelmingly conclusive, leaving no room for doubt. They felt a sense of relief knowing they had assembled a solid case to ensure Carla would face justice. With the case thoroughly prepared, the next step was to proceed with Carla's arrest. Carla was arrested at her apartment, showing no reaction at all, stunned into complete silence. At that moment, she grasped the full weight of the severe consequences her actions would bring. As the police van drove her away, Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. After months of hard work, justice for Sophia had finally been served. The legal proceedings didn't take much time thanks to the ample amount of evidence. Although Carla's defense claimed she had been framed, the evidence told a different story. The emails, the hair strand, the stalking, and the profile of a jealous and possessive woman involved in an affair with a husband unwilling to leave his wife all contributed to a compelling case. Ultimately, Carla was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Sophia's absence left a huge emptiness in everyone's lives, a gap that could never be filled. Megan, Sophia's sister, stepped up to care for Anna and Tyler. She moved into the Carson home, offering the children stability and support. As they all dealt with their grief, Megan's bond with her niece and nephew grew stronger. Together, they kept Sophia's memory alive and found comfort in the love she had given them. Now that the case has been closed, one question still bothers me. Why did Carla have the keys to the Carsons' house in the first place? Even in an emergency, Richard would not have wanted Carla to access the house, as it would risk exposing the affair. So why did he give her the keys? If she hadn't had them, she would have had to break in, potentially alerting Sophia and possibly saving her life. Additionally, why did Richard come forward with such an overwhelming amount of evidence against Carla? Did he hope to avoid blame for Sophia's murder by providing extensive incriminating evidence to the police? Did he deliberately stir up Carla's jealousy to push her over the edge, making himself the real manipulator? Well, these are just mere speculations. But again, everything in the world of crime is a speculation until it's not.